You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. Got a real treat for you today. A new book has just come out called The Cycle of War and the Coronavirus by our good friend Martin Armstrong. And I would say go over to Amazon and get it, but it might be in tight supply. But definitely well worth your time. It's a great read. Martin, it's great to have you back on. Oh, send us any questions that you have for Martin, and we'll forward them off to him. The email address is kl@kerrylutz.com. So you're talking pre-call. You really have no place you can go in the world to escape what's coming, do you?
Well, I think Asia is going to basically be better. China is actually going to come in with probably about a 4% growth rate for 2020. You look at Britain, it's down 9.9%, almost 10. So the West has really gone completely crazy, and it seems to be more for this agenda coming from the World Economic Forum. And I find it really curious how, like, New York Times are, that's a conspiracy theory. When they're the ones that have a video out with the 8 things that they want to do, you'll own nothing and all the rest of the stuff. It's just absurd that and they're the ones that are calling this the Great Reset. And it was the World Economic Forum, and I believe it was the marketing firm Edelman, who's in partners with him, that came up with the whole Build Back Better thing. Then you have Biden standing up, I'm calling this Build Back Better. Yeah, right, you did. You go to Canada, it's Build Back Better, London. I mean, they all have the same talking points. And when have you ever seen all these world leaders with the same thing? The head of the UN saying it, the head of the IMF, ECB, all Build Back Better. And it's just absurd. What's really going on is they're really deranged. They think that they can further their climate change agenda by destroying all jobs that they deem are not green. And then you have, like, Kerry standing up and saying coal miners should go learn to create solar panels.
Yeah, right.
As if there's a job down the street for them. And nobody says, maybe there's no solar, panel factory even near them. So they have to sell their house and then move and hope to get a job. I mean, not everybody can do the same thing. I mean, that was the problem in the Great Depression. Unemployment went to 25% because of the Dust Bowl. And you had 40% of the employment in agriculture. They couldn't make the transition to manufacture. A friend of mine was a pilot during the Korean War. And when jets came out, the old pilots from prop, a lot of them, the majority, said could not make the transition to jets because you'd have to react 10 times faster than a prop. So, you might be able to fly a Piper Cub. That doesn't mean you can fly a 747. It's just really ridiculous with all these things. And it's coming down from such elitist people that have never worked with their hands. Yet they're there to tell the world how to reshape itself. And, Schwab is out here with his 4th industrial revolution and stakeholder economics. The whole stakeholder economics began in 1932 before there were social programs. Yes, it made some sense then. But once the government took over, Social Security and all this and welfare programs, that ended that. And it was the worst performing stock market basically until the end of this whole thing, and it started in the 80s. But That's when, Milton Friedman came out and was arguing that, no, it should not be stakeholder. It should be shareholder. A corporation is supposed to support its shareholders and not everybody out on the street. Then you got into a takeover boom. They made the movie Wall Street Week, with Douglas in it. But, if you look at what it was, we put charts out on it. Why was the takeover boom? Because after all that period of the stakeholder, you could buy a company, sell its assets, and triple your money. It was the low in book value relative to the Dow was 1977. So how was the stock market, even, they were, overvalued. There was such a takeover boom, and they were like blaming greed and stuff. No, the point is that, if you had a company, you bought it and you sold the assets, you made money. That shouldn't be the case. But that was, basically what you ended up with 50 years of this stakeholder stuff that he's now trying to bring back.
Yeah, well, just because it's a bad idea doesn't mean that the globalists will ever admit it and stop pushing for the agenda. I remember I had a guy on, he passed away subsequently. His name was Ned Schmidt, agricultural commodities expert. And he predicted that in another 10 to 15 years, a T-bone steak would be a luxury that few people would ever have.
Well, they are definitely trying to do that. That is one of the things in Schwab's, predictions for 2030, that you'll still have meat, but it will be like a special treat, like a dog, I guess.
Yeah.
Then you got the UN actually with things out there that we should be eating bugs. What is it with you people? I really don't know. What do they rise to that level and they suddenly lose all common sense or something? It's just they go delusional. I don't know.
Yeah,
I have no interest in eating cockroaches. Thank you.
Hey, I was at a restaurant. This was years ago, like 7 years ago in Austin, Texas, the top restaurant in Austin, and they had a salad with cricket paste. And after I heard that, I had no desire for anything on the menu. I said, I am not eating bugs. I don't care what.
Yeah, no. They're just such elitists, and they sit around in their 5-star hotels drinking, their port or wine, and sitting around talking about how the world should work. And none of them have ever done anything. Schwab is an academic. Look, Pickety, he just wrote a report out recommending that Europe should default on all its debt, and like the French Revolution, and then we start over and issue new debt. Like, hello, do you understand who owns most of the debt? The pension funds.
Yeah.
You're just going to wipe them out. And there's no common sense to anything that these people are saying. And, what I've argued all along, what people have to understand is, and they go, oh, well, because on gold, I've disagreed. I said gold does not go up with inflation. If you look at it, take the CPI, from 1980, gold should be $12,000. What makes it go up? It's when the confidence in the government collapses, and that's where we're starting to get to. So we're at this stage in the game. Going into 1980, those of us were around back then. Remember, it was Jimmy Carter and tried to rescue the people, in Tehran, and the helicopters crashed. He couldn't do anything correct.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And he was a nice guy, but it just completely wiped out the confidence in the United States that they could take our embassy and we couldn't do anything about it. And it's very similar to what brought Rome down, that the confidence in the government collapsed when the Emperor Valerian I was captured by the Persians and turned into a slave. So can you imagine if you took the President of the United States, you went to go visit Russia, and they said, we're keeping him, that's it. He's going to polish my shoes for the rest of his life, and you can't even go get him? The confidence collapsed.
That might not be a bad thing right now, Martin.
No, maybe not. But I mean, that's what you're talking about. When the confidence in government collapses, then you don't hoard the money. But I mean, we put charts on the velocity. The velocity peaked in 2007 in money, and it's been declining ever since. And with the pandemic, it looks like a real waterfall. It's just completely dropped dramatically. So when the velocity, basically declines, it means people are hoarding their cash. They're not spending it. If you don't trust the future, you hold on. You don't go out and party all the time. So the tipping point is when, okay, fine, you don't trust the future, but now all of a sudden you start looking at it and you see prices are starting to rise because of shortages. And so now all of a sudden it becomes more advantageous to buy it now because it will only cost you more tomorrow.
Right. So that crack up boom.
That's the key, as opposed to, well, why should I buy anything because it's always cheaper tomorrow? So they hoard money. I mean, I bought a refrigerator, went down to Best Buy and in December, and it's not being delivered to March.
Oh, you got lucky. You got lucky.
Yeah, I know. I said, what is the problem? And they said, oh, well, the chips come from Thailand. So this pandemic has caused a collapse in the production of a lot of things, as well as the supply chain. So, we're seeing, we're going to see agricultural rise dramatically. China is already now just passed a law to stockpile food because this pandemic has really destroyed a lot. Spain, they lost a lot of the crops because people couldn't move. Well, who actually picked the crops? They were migrant workers that came down from Poland. Well, now you didn't allow them to come down. There wasn't anybody there to pick the crops, and they rotted. That was it. I mean, you go on YouTube, and people had to plow under fields of potatoes. They couldn't get on the market, or kill 40,000 chickens because they couldn't get on the market.
Yeah.
So what we're facing is inflation from shortages, right, which is a little bit different, but that then creates the inflationary spike. So then people start saying, well, gee, okay, I need a refrigerator. I can't wait a year. And so they start paying more to get it sooner. And then that's how the inflation develops. And that's what we're looking at going into 2024.
And black markets emerge, and then people start buying used products because they got to have it. You can't not have a refrigerator in modern America, in modern life. Where do you put your food? Are you going to go get an ice box like they had back in the early 1900s or the late 1800s? Hey, question for you, Martin. The whole short squeeze that took place, the Redditors and all that. What is your take on short squeezes that are happening here?
Look, it may have been a short squeeze with one fund, but honestly, our computer was long GameStop for almost a year, and it kept projecting it up. So I can't imagine someone with a basic computer program to trade would be short that market. I mean, you would have been long. I mean, if somebody was short, it was just simply their brain dead ideas. But probably any short squeeze that really took place comes more from this high frequency type of trading. And the problem with that is that when you do get into high volatility, it tends to shut down. So you can definitely get trapped. I mean, those algorithms work okay in a normal market, but when you start gapping like that, they can't handle it and they start shutting down. So that becomes the short squeeze. If that's the problem with that type of trading. You really have to be more of a trend follower versus that high frequency stuff. There's just a lot more risk to the high frequency than people realize.
Yeah, much more risk. But, how do you short 140% of a stock? I still can't kind of get that one through my brain, Martin.
Don't just survive, thrive. The Financial Survival Network.
Dorae Copper Mining is a premier, near-term, high-grade copper and gold redevelopment opportunity with tremendous exploration potential only 14 kilometers from the town of Chibougamau in mine-friendly Quebec. Dorae Copper is debt-free and owns a 2,700-ton-per-day mill with an 8 million-ton tailings facility ready to be used. There is already power to site, and it is accessible by paved highway and rail. Dorae Copper aims to produce a profitable hub-and-spoke operation of over 100,000 gold equivalent ounces per year, or over 60 million pounds of copper equivalent by 2024. Because of the existing infrastructure and location, a low capex is anticipated to recommence production. Dorae Copper trades under DCMC in Toronto and under DRCMF on the OTC. To learn more, go to doraecopper.com. That's doraecopper.com.
This is the Financial Survival Network, the information you need to thrive now more than ever.
Well, it's because they are allowed also with some rules for naked shorts, which is kind of crazy. But this is where the world that we tend to live in. And the real problem was, people may not have been around in 1980, but I remember it very well. How did they get the Hunt brothers out when the professionals just changed the rules at the exchange? They made it like $5,000 on a margin to go short and $50,000 to be long. And it was outrageous. But then all of a sudden, you raise the margin requirements up dramatically on the hunts. And that to me was a huge manipulation, because I knew the Hunt brothers before. And I knew in the early 70s they were buying up silver. They were selling it to them even. And so at the end, it was the professionals who wanted to short the market started saying hunts, and they're going to take it to $100. That got all the retail people in. And then when they get in, they short it. And then they change the rules. And this has been the game for a long time. The main guys at Goldman Sachs, you take Blankfein, etc. They came from Jay Aaron. Jay Aaron was the trader. It was the trading of commodities and futures which took over Wall Street. The Wall Street guys were the buy and the hold group. The commodity guys came in and took over Wall Street. So that was when, Salomon Brothers was bought out by the commodity trading guys at Fibro. So, this is the way it's been going. So, at that point in time, it was the high trading activity. The real traders from the commodity side went and took over Wall Street.
Right.
And it's been ever since has been changed.
All right. So when you had these Redditors going after silver, all right, you had to kind of roll your eyes and wonder what they were thinking. However, they did manage to buy out all the retail bullion out there. I know bullion dealers that had like nothing, and they got them to the point where there was so much buying on the weekend that they had to shut down their operations. They couldn't sell anymore because they were hedged going into the weekend, and they couldn't adjust the hedge on their silver, so they just had to stop. Yeah, no, that's
when I was a market maker, a lot of people ended up, attributing the overnight markets to me, because actually what happened was it was exactly that problem. I was making markets in gold, and I couldn't do a hedge or anything, once COMEX closed. So I knew I had a friend in Hong Kong, and I said, hey, can I sell there in Hong Kong? He said, yes. But the problem was I could hedge it off in Hong Kong, but I had to make physical delivery in London. I said, what kind of system is this? So then I had a friend in London who would have to make the physical delivery over there, and then I would exchange him a COMEX contract from New York. And I got so, lost sleep, really sleep doing this all the time. So that's when I walked into Rudolph Wolf and I said, look, I'll show you guys how to do this so I can get some sleep. And we basically started the overnight markets came from gold. And it was only because I knew people on both sides.
Right. Yeah. So precious metals, what's the outcome? We've got real serious confidence crises in governments all over the world. Doesn't matter where. Pandemic has just kind of served to emphasize the inability of government to handle the most basic functions, let alone elections and things like that. Is this the crisis in confidence that's finally going to propel precious metals higher?
Yeah, I mean, I still think, the silver, as I've been saying, been warning that the silver would rise faster than gold, mainly because they've been knuckling down on gold everywhere. I mean, you can't buy it in France. The people I know in France, they have it shipped to Belgium because they can't pay all the crazy taxes on it. I know guys in the refining business, and they have to keep track of every little gram that comes in, where did it come from, and where did it go. They're not doing that in silver. So the regulations in gold are quite onerous at this stage, and I think that's why you're starting to see silver outperforming percentage-wise. But this is across the board, and I think that this impeachment is pretty, I would say, damning. I think we may look back at it as the straw that broke the camel's back sort of thing. I mean, it's clearly illegal. I mean, the Constitution expressly states he's got to be the president, and the chief of the justice is supposed to preside. So Adrian Roberts said, "No, I'm not presiding. He's not president." So it's just political vendetta, and you have to wonder if this whole thing hasn't been staged, because it's clearly it was in the planning prior to this for weeks. And there were people that, on video, all in hoodies, so you couldn't see who they were, putting, pipe bombs down. And of course, they didn't go off. But, so now they've put this whole, they're calling it the Pelosi wall around Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
And there's proposals to make it permanent. And there's arguments in Congress over that. She wants to keep it up all the time, period. So, it's ironic that a wall is immoral. It was what she was saying about Trump, to keep illegal aliens out, but a wall to keep Americans out of Capitol Hill is not immoral, I guess. I don't know. But I think it's more of indicative of their plans. I mean, if you look at what has happened in Britain, what Boris Johnson has done over there, it's dramatic. They tell people, if you see your neighbor leaving your house, report them. I mean, they have basically really destroyed society. And so you have people ratting on everybody else. I mean, that's exactly what it was in East Germany.
Hey, so here's a question, and I don't know what the computer says. Is Trump going to be the next Grover Cleveland? If you remember, Grover Cleveland won the first election, lost the second, and then came back, won the third election. So he's the only president in history to serve 2 terms unconsecutively. Is that a possibility for Trump, or is we just never going to see any legitimate elections again?
I don't think you're really going to see legitimate elections. I mean, the polls currently are showing 70% of Republicans would leave the Republican Party and join Trump's third party. You have serious problems down there. And, from the day that Trump was elected, the elite Republicans were against him. Why? I mean, as you know, I've been going back and forth and working on Capitol Hill and advising for decades. And when Reagan was elected, they all said, "Oh, okay, he's an outsider. He was a governor and not a congressman or a senator." So that's their view. You're an outsider. And the thing is, well, it'd be okay. We're going to train him. And they did the same thing to Trump. And Trump was naive. He allowed himself, he said, okay, fine. and they put all the people to run the government around him, like Bolton, etc. Then he starts firing them when he realizes they're not doing what he's telling them to do. Bolton, so, this is, outrageous. He went to send more troops in Afghanistan. And Trump basically said, look, they've been fighting over these borders for 1,000 years. What are we going to do? It's the president who has to sign the letters for everybody that dies, and go to their parents. He says, this is ridiculous. What are they dying for? And so he's the only president that basically didn't wage war. What did Biden do as soon as he got in? Sent troops to Syria, and he's building a camp there.
Yeah.
Look, unfortunately, this is just the way it goes. Eisenhower warned about military establishment, and that's what it is. They want more plants, they want more people dying, and that's how they make their money.
Yeah.
And it's disgusting, but this is what happens. Trump, our computer is showing 2022. It's quite remarkable. We have what we call a panic cycle. Now, I see this in markets. This is in politics for 2022, and I have not seen that since the Great Depression. So to me, it looks like we're probably going to have a breakup, third parties. Even in the Democrats, you have conservatives and you have the extreme left, like the AOC stuff. And they are arguing themselves over different things back and forth. I think you're going to see a third party emerge, and you might even see some of the conservative Democrats leave and join this. Because they're not necessarily also in agreement with all this crazy stuff that they're proposing. And they have, people who are going to, like coal miners and stuff. They can't say, okay, fine, they're going to lose all the jobs. We don't need coal. What are they going to do? There is no other alternative in their area. Are you going to pay for them, buy their houses so they can move? There's no consideration of any of this.
Yeah, pipeline workers, same deal. And look, we got to have oil for the foreseeable future, even if it's going to diminish as far as motor transport fuel. But we still have to have it because everything in our modern life is a synthetic material derived from petrochemicals, which are derived from oil, of course. Hey, question for you. So copper, we've seen, had a huge run. Is that going to continue? Are we going to really see full electrification of all of our energy here in society? I don't think it's going to be successful, no. That's part of the real crazy attitude with these people. You have Newsom out in California saying no buildings can be constructed with natural gas. They have to have rolling blackouts now. They don't have a power grid enough to even support what's current, no less force everything else onto electricity. And just look at Germany. They've just had a huge, snowstorms. The solar panels are buried, and the wind stopped. People were freezing. That's hysterical.
It is. The same thing as, renewables is not the answer. And what you have, I won't say who, but I've been talking to people up in Alberta. They're going after pipeline number 5 now to stop that, the environmentalists. And the people in Alberta say, please go ahead, because they know what's going to happen. That pipeline number 5 basically keeps, natural gas and keeps the state of Michigan warm. Mm-hmm. All right. Also Ontario. Go ahead, shut it down. Please go ahead, shut it down. The prices are going to go up dramatically, and everything's going to have to be put into containers and taken by train, and people are going to freeze. Maybe that's what it's going to take to get people to realize, hey, wait a minute, this is nuts. We're a multinational company. We've got offices from China, Thailand, Singapore, Abu Dhabi, Germany, London. I can't bring in any of my staff from overseas. Everybody's stranded. We had our conference there in Orlando, and they all had to appear basically by video.
It's insane.
It's crazy.
And the pandemic, so vaccines, all this. Is the pandemic finally going to end? Because I think it's mostly I had COVID. I was in the hospital. I survived it. But the pandemic, it seems to be in most people's minds more than reality when you look at the actual death figures and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, that's been basically used to terrorize people. I mean, my two next door neighbors, they got it, and she was pregnant. She just had her baby fine, Yet I know somebody that was pregnant up in Philadelphia and had COVID, and the doctor said, "Oh, you better abort because they'll be deformed." I mean, this is just completely crazy. And that when I went to a pulmonary guy and well, maybe you had COVID, and I said, "I've been tested 5 times." I said, "It's negative, okay?" And they said, "Yeah, but that doesn't mean anything." Why? I said, "Why?" Because the tests aren't valid. And this is the head of Tampa, over at General Hospital over there. I said, "Oh, gee, thank you very much." And then I said, "Okay, fine. So if I didn't know anybody, how do I get it?" "Oh, well, you could have got it from pumping gas." I said, "Oh, okay." So look at her masks.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an excuse for absolutely everything. I mean, this is
the mask
a real.
thing. Yeah,
it's crazy. I mean, the thing going on around is that the Amish, they go, "Well, how come you guys don't get COVID?" And they said, "Well, we don't watch TV."
That's great. Hey, one other question here, and then we'll let you go, get on with your day. Stock market. As the economy implodes, is it going to keep on going higher?
Yeah, I mean, you're making a temporary high, short-term correction, and choppiness we see at this stage in the game. And May is probably the most important month this year. But what you have to understand is you have cash. You don't want to buy government bonds. And what else is there? I mean, yes, the retail guy can go into gold or whatever. We're talking about, trillions of dollars here. They can't buy gold and say, "Give me delivery," or silver bars, et cetera. So the big money ends up going into the equity side. You're fleeing the bond market and you're going there. Capital, our models have been picking up capital flows that have been pouring out of Europe already. And some have been coming into the U.S. Share market. The rest of it, a lot of it has been buying Chinese bonds, paying 3%. They have more confidence in the Chinese, economy than they do in Western Europe or the United States after Biden's gotten in. So the capital in the stock market. I mean, you can go to our site. We've published charts on the PE ratio in the S&P 500. The peak, the absolute peak in the PE ratio was at the bottom in 2009. Why? Because at that stage in the game, you don't trust the banks, you don't trust the government, so what do? Well, I'll buy, IBM. I don't think they're going to go bust. It's not a question of, do I think I'm going to make money? Do I think I'm going to get most of my money back? So it's just like a deposit, really, and that's what's going on. So the stock market, our first, target would probably be in the 35 to 37,000 range. But longer term, you're going out like by 2032, or at Dow, you're probably looking at around 65,000 at that stage. But it's a question of just moving money from cash. You don't want government bonds. I mean, this is the real crisis. The ECB, taking rates to negative. I mean, they can't afford to raise them. If they raise them, their own budget blows up. And they're different than the Fed. The Fed is independent. The Fed has the power to increase or decrease, its elastic money supply. The ECB is not. The ECB can actually go bankrupt.
Sure.
It has to go to all 28 members to ask permission. And so it's not independent. And each of these states have to contribute to it. So that's a completely different structure that people don't understand. All central banks are not the same.
Yeah, very true. Not created equal. Hey, well...
No, they're not. So that's the real crisis, and it's really coming out of Europe. And the more they keep trying to use this pandemic as the excuse to further this agenda for the Great Reset. And you have to understand what Schwab's number one forecast, I don't think is going to be plausible. and him saying that you'll own nothing and you'll be happy.
Yeah.
What is that? That is basically telling government the way to default on their debt is to shift it and say, gee, we're doing this for you. You're not going to owe any mortgages, student loans. We're going to forgive everything. But at the same time, they're defaulting on all theirs. So it's just basically a shell game. But that's what his proposal is, for them to default on all the debt. And you got Pickety coming out with the same thing. Well, we should just look at the French Revolution. They defaulted on all the debt and it was fine.
Yeah, well, they just paid off the last remaining debt from the French Revolution about 10 or 15 years ago. All right, we're going to let you go now. Just go over to armstrongeconomics.com, sign up for Martin's daily missives. You don't want to miss them. And hey, go to our site, financialsurvivalnetwork.com, and sign up for our newsletter. Martin, always great to talk with you, and we'll talk to you again real soon. Let's keep our fingers crossed.
Okay, take care of yourself out there.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.